Hello, little star. Welcome to Soft Star Stories, a place for quiet minds and cozy dreams. Tonight, we'll visit the forest with Millie Bear, Benny Bunny, and Timothy Turtle. Get tucked in, snuggle up, and let your breath slow down. We're going to have a very gentle adventure. Let's begin. Bunny's blanket boat. Benny Bunny could not fall asleep. It wasn't that he wasn't tired. He was. He had brushed his teeth. He had fluffed his pillows. Millie Bear had even read him a bedtime story about a fox who collected stars in a teacup. But Benny's legs felt wiggly, and his ears wouldn't stop twitching. I think, he whispered to himself, I need to sail. So he tiptoed out of bed, grabbed his softest blanket, the one with tiny moons stitched along the edge, and laid it carefully on the floor. He added his pillow to the center. Then, for good luck, a sparkly button from Millie Bear's sewing jar. With a small hop, Benny climbed into his blanket boat. The lights of his room dimmed. The walls faded like mist. The floor melted into soft, shimmering water. And just like that, he was sailing. His blanket boat drifted across a quiet lake under a star-speckled sky. The stars blinked slowly, like they were yawning. The water made no sound at all, just soft swishes as the boat moved forward, always gently forward. Below him, moonfish swam in small, sleepy circles. They glowed blue and pink and silver, like jelly beans made of light. They didn't mind Benny floating above them. They only blinked up once in a while with curious, drowsy eyes. The sky above was a deep navy blue, dusted with stars, and one very round moon who seemed to be humming. It wasn't a tune exactly, just a feeling. A hum that said, "You're safe. You're sailing. All is well." Benny passed a little island made of moss and marshmallow puffs. Snails in pajamas were having a tea party on tiny toadstool tables. "Would you like a cup of sleepy time tea?" asked one snail in a polka dot robe. Benny smiled, but his yawn was too big to answer. The snail nodded politely. "Sleepy already? That's a good sign." The boat continued on. A soft breeze blew across the lake. Benny's ears fluttered just slightly. The moonfish followed in a lazy trail, blinking like tiny lanterns in the dark. Up ahead, a glowing sign floated just above the water. "Library ahead." Soon Benny's boat reached a dock made of giant floating books. Each book was open, its pages flipping slowly in the night air. One whispered fairy tales, another muttered lullabies. A puffy white cloud drifted down from the sky and rested gently on the dock. From it stepped a small cloud librarian, wearing tiny glasses and holding a feather pen. "Hello, dear sailor," the cloud librarian said. "Are you returning a dream or borrowing a new one?" Benny thought, "I think I'm just floating." The librarian nodded. "That counts too." She handed him a folded paper crane. "This is for later. In case you drift too far, it knows the way home. Benny tucked the crane into the edge of his blanket. As he sailed away, the library faded behind him. The books closed with soft little puffs of story dust, and the pages whispered, "Good night, good night." The boat floated into a new part of the lake where the stars came closer, almost brushing the surface of the water. From the sky, a tiny hedgehog on a shooting star zipped down and circled Benny's boat, leaving behind a trail of glitter that didn't sparkle. It glowed very softly, like a glowworm wrapped in a blanket. "Need a guide?" the hedgehog asked sleepily. Benny shook his head. "Thought so," said the hedgehog. "You're already going where you're meant to." He zoomed away, spiraling up, 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 until he became just another sleepy star in the sky. Benny's boat glided gently through the starlit mist. He passed an island shaped like a teacup. On it sat a frog wearing a crown of moss, snoozing in a rocking chair made of reeds. Near the edge, a small orchestra of fireflies played music so slow and soft. Benny wasn't sure if he was hearing it or dreaming it. He curled up tighter in his boat. The edges of the blanket rose up just a little like the sides of a proper ship, warm and tucked in. The lake grew wider, the sky darker, the stars a bit softer. Then, just ahead, Benny saw something unusual. A curtain of glowing vines hanging from the sky like a waterfall of light. His boat floated through the vines. They tickled his ears and whispered, "Shh, shh, shh." And on the other side, there it was, the quiet sea. No moonfish here, no talking snails, just stars and silence and the sound of Benny's breath. The boat slowed. It didn't stop. It just floated and floated and floated. And Benny felt himself growing heavy in the best way. His eyes blinked slowly, once, twice, then a little slower. Somewhere the paper crane the librarian had given him fluttered gently in his paw. And then the world tilted. Not the real world, just the sleepy blanket boat one. The edges faded. The stars blinked once more. The lake dimmed. And when Benny opened his eyes again, he was back in his room. The blanket boat was still there. His sparkly button was still tucked beside his paw, and the moon outside his window hummed the same hum it had over the lake. He blinked once more, then again, and without even meaning to, his eyes stayed closed, his paws curled gently, his ears twitched once, and Benny Bunny, gentle sailor of sleepy lakes, borrower of paper dreams, blanket captain of the quiet sea, fell asleep. For real this time, all the way asleep and all the way home. Timothy Turtle's Naptime Garden. Timothy Turtle wasn't the fastest at anything, and he didn't mind. He liked to take his time, especially when it came to naps. One afternoon, he had a thought. What if he made a place that was perfect for sleeping? He wandered slowly through the forest, collecting soft moss in his little satchel. Then he picked lavender sprigs, fern leaves, and even a tiny mushroom umbrella. With help from Benny Bunny, who fetched daisies, and Millie Bear, who carried a soft pine cone pillow, he began building. His naptime garden. In a quiet corner of the woods, under a weeping willow, Timothy placed each piece with care. The moss became a bed. The flowers stood like gentle guards, and the mushroom shaded his shell just right. When he lay down, a warm breeze rustled the petals. Bees hummed in the distance. The clouds drifted slowly above. And as he closed his eyes, Timothy imagined a dream garden even more magical than his own, with stars blooming in the sky and sleepy butterflies landing softly on his shell. The forest held him gently as he drifted, and the world grew quiet. Millie Bear and the Sleepy Forest Festival. In the heart of the whispering pines, Millie Bear was stirring honey into a cup of warm tea. She had a gentle rhythm to her mornings. Stretch, yawn, wiggle toes, and open the window. Outside, the forest air smelled like pine needles and clouds. Today was a special day. Once each season, the animals of the forest gathered for the Sleepy Forest Festival, a quiet celebration full of twinkly lights, cozy fires, and soft music played on acorns and tree bark. It wasn't loud. It wasn't busy. It was just the right amount of wonderful. Millie buttoned her little blue cardigan, the one with wooden buttons carved like stars, and packed her satchel with a blanket, a small jar of cloudberry jam, and her favorite wooden spoon. Outside, Benny Bunny was already bouncing in place, his ears flopping with excitement. Timothy Turtle was there too, slowly tying a ribbon around a lantern made from a hollow gourd. "Did you bring the sleepy seeds?" Millie asked Timothy. He nodded and opened a tiny pouch filled with dandelion stars, fluffy little wishes that shimmered just slightly in the sunlight. Together, they began their walk along the winding path. The forest felt different on festival day. The light was golden and soft, like it had been brushed on with a giant feather. Leaves twirled gently to the ground. Even the breeze whispered slowly, like it didn't want to wake anyone. As they walked, they passed old friends. Mr. Badger sweeping his porch with a cinnamon-scented broom, a sleepy squirrel knitting socks on a mossy stump, and tiny birds chirping lullabies as they carried feathers to their nests. Finally, they arrived at the clearing, the coziest spot in the whole forest. A circle of toadstools had been arranged like cushions. Above them, lanterns made from glowing mushrooms swayed gently. In the middle, Miss Owl perched atop a wide stump, wearing a shawl made of woven spider silk. "Welcome, my darlings," she hooted softly. "The Sleepy Forest Festival begins." First came the Snuggle Parade. Each animal brought something comforting to share. Benny Bunny shared his fluffiest pillow. Millie unrolled her patchwork quilt, the one stitched by her grandma. Timothy placed his pine cone teacup on a stump and poured warm mint leaf water for everyone. The little foxes curled up together, noses tucked in tails. Even the usually busy raccoons were rocking in tiny hammocks tied between trees. Next came the dream lanterns. Millie and her friends helped place dandelion stars into gourd lanterns. One by one, they lit up with a soft, silvery glow. They weren't like fire, more like moonlight held in a jar. They lined the edge of the clearing, each one whispering dreams into the air. Soft ones, gentle ones. Millie closed her eyes and made a wish. Not a loud wish, just a quiet one. I hope we always have nights like this. She felt the wind nod in reply. Then came the listening hour. No one spoke. They just listened to the rustling trees, to the crickets humming low, to the soft breathing of sleepy creatures curled up in bundles. Miss Owl told a story in a voice that was half whisper, half wind, a tale about a shooting star who forgot how to fall, and how a turtle helped guide it gently home. Timothy blushed. As she spoke, the lanterns flickered in rhythm. Each blink a heartbeat, each glow a yawn. Millie nestled between her friends. Benny's head rested on her shoulder, his ear twitching in a dream. Timothy had already fallen asleep in his shell, just the tip of his nose poking out. Millie's eyes grew heavier with each word of Miss Owl's story. The clearing felt like a lullaby, the air like a soft blanket, the sky a quilt stitched with stars. And just before she drifted into her dreams, Millie whispered into the moss, "Good night, sleepy forest." Millie is dreaming now, so is Benny, and Timothy too. And maybe you are too. Drift gently now, breathe slowly. You're safe. You're loved. Good night, little star.